I remember reading some books from Dan Kennedy, one in particular, which is called the No BS Strategies, or actually the No BS Wealth Magnets for Entrepreneurs. And from reading that book and some of his other books, I remember thinking very specifically how reading the book, and you may also have the experience of when you read to yourself, perhaps there's a voice that goes along with it. Maybe if you've heard the author speaking before, or it could be your own voice or a voice that you choose. I know that not everyone does this, but a majority of people who read to themselves hear a voice reading. And I had already listened to Dan Kennedy speaking many, many times. I'd seen him on videos and also listened to many audio recordings of him because I was part of the GKIC Gold membership. Dan Kennedy is sometimes called the millionaire maker because supposedly in his industry, which is information marketing, he has helped to create more millionaire business makers from people who have successfully applied the strategies that he teaches in marketing. So Dan Kennedy is to just sum it up and use terminology that many people are familiar with. It's very cliche, but he is a marketing guru. He's pretty well known he's a celebrity in marketing. If you study and research marketing or have taken marketing training, Dan Kennedy is the man, as it's said, as they say. So the point here is about something that I've used in conjunction, stacking AI, using an AI workflow that I simply call dictation, transcription, and summarization. And from reading Dan Kennedy's book, The No BS Wealth Attraction, or No BS Wealth Magnets, is it Wealth Attraction or Wealth? It could be Wealth Magnets. Wealth Attraction for Entrepreneurs. I think that's actually what it is. The No BS Wealth Attraction for Entrepreneurs. It could be the No BS Wealth Magnets for Entrepreneurs, but I believe I said earlier it was Wealth Magnets, but I believe it's the No BS Wealth Attraction for Entrepreneurs. So, and in the book there were wealth magnets, but reading it to myself and hearing his voice, I remember thinking very distinctly, very clearly how the book was written very much how he speaks. And this doesn't happen when I read every book from every author that I've heard before. And I came to realize it is because Dan Kennedy has many of his talks recorded and then transcribed, and various different parts of his talks and his live events are edited into his books. And that's how, he really makes efficient use of his speaking. Now, something that immediately comes to mind is the cult leader L. Ron Hubbard. And this is one thing that's admirable about how he was able to produce so many books, was he did the same thing. He recorded a lot of talks on audio and then had them transcribed and then edited into books. So it's just this is the point I'm making about words turning into text and becoming written material for people to read, becoming books. That's what the whole point I'm getting out here. And there are also some very interesting workflow efficiency hacks here that I will get to. So Dan Kennedy did this dictation for his live events and for teaching, but then would have it transcribed and then edited into books. I don't know L. Ron Hubbard's process, but I do know that he did do a lot of speaking and a lot of his words, because I've also read a lot of his books and I've heard him speaking, and so I know that also with him, his words were transcribed and edited into various different books and written material. And then I recall I was, for a time, there is an author, Seth Godin, who I had heard about some time ago when I was studying a lot of marketing guys, starting back in 2013, when I got really a little bit more serious about it. I had heard about Seth Godin, Dan Kennedy, Ryan Dice, and these terms, attraction marketing and magnetic marketing, were going around at the time. And that's when people first started talking a little bit more about content marketing, and it was way before the term, content creators and all that. And copy blogger was getting really popular back then. You can look all those things up and those names, and you'll see. I mean, even just me name dropping those people, not that I know them, but just saying their names, it's gold. If you look up Dan Kennedy, if you look up Ryan Dice, if you look up Seth Godin, if you look up the terms magnetic marketing, attraction marketing, content marketing, just looking up those and defining those things alone will really, really step up your game in promotion, marketing, sales, advertising. So Seth Godin is one of the guys that I heard about, and his name popped up again recently in late 2024, 2025. And I started listening to a lot of podcasts that he was speaking on. And the reason was because he has a new book out called This Is Strategy. And just some really amazing things. I actually bought the book. I read a couple of the riffs, he calls them, in the book. And I really like that because I'm a musician. I play guitar, and one of the things that we call a different section in making music is a guitar riff. So I thought that was really cool. And the idea in his book was his riffs. His book doesn't have chapters and sections and things like that. They're simply these various different essays that are numbered. There's somewhere around 300 of them. I forget the number, maybe 298, something like that in the book. And they're just simply these different riffs that he wrote, these essays about various different things, various different strategy techniques. Let's just say that there are various different strategy essays. They're essays on strategy. That's what it is. And that's what these riffs are. So there's these various different essays on strategy in the book, This Is Strategy. Point, though, is that in listening to one of these, something stuck out to me because I had been practicing it already, and I'd done dozens and dozens of podcasts this way and really tested it out, where I was speaking into one of my devices. I have an iPhone and an Android, and I was using the Galaxy voice recorder, and then I was having it transcribe and then summarize, and then I was just publishing the raw, unedited transcripts and summaries along with embedding my podcast into the blog to really just fill out some content. And what I realized right away was that for some reason the Galaxy AI transcription is terrible. The summaries, for some reason, seem to get it more right than the actual transcription. Maybe it's probably because the summary takes that information and maybe does a web search and cleans up some of the things based on the context. So that could be what it is. I'm not sure. I've never really looked into it. But I just simply labeled the process dictation, transcription, summarization, because that's what I was doing. I was dictating into the recorder, having it transcribed and summarized, and then I was simply publishing that all along with the podcast so that it was a really good transparency workflow that I had there. So you could hear my voice, you could hear what I was speaking, the original idea, and then you could see the transcript. And what I would do is I would publish I would plug in the blog, the order. If you opened up a blog on one of my sites, you would see the podcast player first, then the summary, and then the transcript, because I wanted to give people the opportunity to listen to it if they wanted to right away and not have to look at anything. You know, they could be driving, doing some other activity, but then have a summary that could summarize everything so they could see what they were in for if they didn't want to listen to it, or if they maybe wanted to see and hear the nuances of my voice for whatever reason. There might be things about me that I get enthusiastic, or that I might be influential in some of the things that I say to some people. And just scientifically, 25% of the people that listen to me without any effort on my part are going to be automatically influenced by me. And this I learned as a student at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, that I got a degree in clinical hypnosis in 2006. So, but listening to Seth Godin, I learned about, and so of course, once again, let me back up to say, I know that my idea is not original, because I just said that Dan Kennedy, at least that I know of, right, beforehand, and then L. Ron Hubbard, right, cult leader, Church of Scientology, you know, and I say cult leader. I just recently watched a video on YouTube about a young lady. I reposted it on my Facebook. I forget what it's called, but she really kind of blew the lid off of a lot of the cult speak and languages and MLM and all that cool stuff, and things that I've been talking about for years. And it was just really nice to see how well organized she packaged all of that information together. So Dan Kennedy, and he also spoke about, I think he even mentioned that he did that he had his speeches and speaking engagements transcribed and then edited into books. I know L. Ron Hubbard did it. And so it's not a new idea that I was doing. It's just that I realized, hey, I can get a lot of content out like this. And the one cool thing about it was I was having conversations with AI. When Google launched Gemini and you were able to speak and have conversations with it, I really pushed it to the limit and created dozens and dozens of podcasts where Google Gemini was like my co-host, and I was just having conversations and recording them, and then having those conversations transcribed and summarized and published. And so I was having AI as my guest on there without, you know, just asking information. And so, but back to Seth Godin. So I just got lucky by listening to his podcast interviews and his guest spots that he was on. And one of them, he mentioned an author named Earl Stanley Gardner, who is the author of these Perry Mason novels. And I didn't know that the Perry Mason originally were novels, although I know a lot of things get adapted. But I do know that my mom watched Perry Mason TV show, which I never really got into. I started to watch one episode of it because it was on one of the things like Tubi or Pluto TV for free or whatever. And it started off, it was really gruesome. It was crazy how it started off with some kind of, well, I won't get into it. It's disturbing. This is about marketing. You can look it up yourself. The very first Perry Mason's TV show. But apparently, from what Seth Godin was saying, that Earl Stanley Gardner dictated to his secretaries, and then they would transcribe what he said, and then those would get published verbatim, and he published millions of words a year into these Perry Mason novels by just simply dictating and transcribing and publishing it directly to the books. And, you know, and Seth Godin made a point to say that's not how I write my books, but that's what Earl Stanley Gardner did. And it gave me, even though we should not need this, it's nice to have sometimes validation or to discover that someone else has been doing or is doing something in a way that is successful for them. That is something that you've already decided to do, or you flow really well with, or you have a really good workflow with that, which I found for myself is a really good workflow, is simply speaking and recording. And then, you know, the fact that AI, even as bad as it is to transcription in Galaxy AI, you can create written content like that. If I really wanted to, I could listen to it and edit it as I went along, but I decided to just publish the raw, unedited transcripts along with the summaries. If I really wanted to, if sometime I wanted to go back and start doing that, I could, because I published a lot of those transcripts. And there's probably a lot better software I could be using. Actually, I know if I paid for it and took the time to figure out other software. There's so much stuff on the market out there right now that transcribes darn near perfect. So it's just, I haven't gotten around to it. I don't know if it's, I don't know what kind of procrastination that is. It's some kind of procrastination, but I just haven't done it. And for some reason, it's just been serving my purpose as far as what I'm doing right now. I know that eventually I will get around to using a different software. I just haven't yet. But probably by stating this again out loud, it's going to probably happen soon. So Earl Stanley Gardner, millions of words a year, Perry Mason novels, they were famous, TV show adaptation, all that. And Seth Godin made a point to say he doesn't write his books like that. He doesn't write his books or his blogs like that. So fine. But just, again, you shouldn't need validation, but it's nice when you get validation, and it also goes along with things that you're doing. When you have a comfortable or a prolific workflow that is particularly useful to you, and you find out that someone has had success with it, it's a good validation for what you're doing. Maybe, because maybe you could be too late, but something like this is not. This is actually really on point here. And so then at the same time, Gary Vaynerchuk, who started Wine Library, bought his dad's business from about $3 or $4 million a year to about $30-40 million a year. I know I'm in the ballpark of those numbers. And he's been on YouTube since 2006, 2007, and gained a lot of success, has one of the largest independent marketing companies in the world right now. And he also came out with a book that was supposed to be it is a follow-up to one of his other books called Jab, Jab, Right Hook or something like that. I never read it, but I listened to him talk about his strategies a lot over the years. I don't know when I discovered him, but it wasn't as early as 2013 when I was really studying Dan Kennedy and a lot of these other marketers. But it was probably, I don't know, maybe it was around then when I first heard of him. But I've been on and off again with Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah, because I do know that I did know about him in 2016 when I first went to China. So it's been a while. I've had it on and off again with Gary Vaynerchuk. I haven't listened to him for a couple of months, but he also just came out with a book that was a follow-up to his jab, jab, left hook, or jab, jab, right hook, whatever. I forget what the name of the book is, but the follow-up book is called Day Trading Attention. And also a lot of things that I talked about and noticed, and about the algorithm, how that really doesn't matter, because it's no longer having to do with who's following you. It has to do with what you're looking at. So the algorithm actually shows you what you want. So it's that like For You page type of stuff on TikTok. TikTok led the charge on all that. So, but I remember listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, one of his talks, and one of the guests who spoke to him says, I got, your audiobook, and I like how, in your audiobook, you kind of go off on tangents about some backstories about some passage that you read, and that's not typical of a lot of audiobooks, because in a lot of audiobooks, people will just read just the dry verbatim just as it is. And so hearing that, I thought, oh, that's really great as well. And so all of these different ideas contribute to the landscape and help to foster really an amalgamation and a confidence in the things that I've been working on. And looking at all of those things together, so dictation, transcription, summarization, and working with AI as well, and then the whole idea of audiobooks, which I had wanted to do for a while. So I figured I basically found a way to break into recording audiobooks on my own and also getting paid for it by using the dictation, transcription, summarization method to generate my own books and then reading them. There's a couple problems with this because I'm first of all, I'm very impatient, and which is not good for an author. Although I'm not sure if I'm impatient, because I've spent years where one of the things that I would do is with GoDaddy, which I've been with since 2006, I would simply open up the WordPress editor live, and I'd be live online on the internet with an internet connection, and I would just start writing while I was online. And I would do my research opening up other windows to find references to the things that I was talking about there, and then I would add those references there, or I would just mention or take a quote and copy and paste it in there and say, oh, this matches up with what I was saying. And that's how I would write. I would simply just open up the editor live online, and then I would start writing what I was inspired to write about, and then I would pull references from other places or name drop people who I heard say these things, and then I would publish it right there online. And so now looking back at a lot of my stuff, there's a great deal of grammar and punctuation, like horrors, but it's fine. I got my ideas and my thoughts out, and I kept on doing it, and for the longest time. So that's how I wanted to write and be a writer, so I just started writing. And that's it. So I'm a writer because I've been writing for years. Now, I may not be a good writer, but that's the point I'm getting to here now, is that I'm impatient. So that's not good for a writer. So what I would do is just like how I am right now, I would just start this stream of consciousness. This is the dictation, transcription, summarization method. Then I would take it and I would ask AI. I was using a system, that was some I think I might have had it for a year, a subscription to something called Nova AI, and it's based on a Chat GPT backbone, or powered by Chat GPT. I don't know how they say that. And so I would then have that organize. I would give instructions to basically organize it into different sections and to fix the grammar and the punctuation for me. And then I also found this service called Designer, which you can write ebooks with, and I generated some text using that. And what I found was not surprising, but kind of disappointing at sometimes disturbing, because what would happen is when I would compare the text that Designer created without any editing at all, I would just say, give it a subject and have it make an ebook, and then I would look at what the AI would reorganize my writing into. It looked almost identical. So it basically took away my voice from when I asked it to clean up the punctuation and the grammar and to organize into paragraphs and so forth, and gave it specific instructions. So the AI just basically, for some reason, you can have your own ideas, and if you let it over edit it, it just turns into it's a very specific way of writing, and you can tell what it is after a while once you become really familiar with it. So I'm going to be moving on from that soon, but my point is that you can have a really great workflow, and I have an AI stack that I use right now. So, for example, right now I'm recording into my Galaxy device, and I'm going to have this transcribed and summarized. Then I'm going to feed it to DeepSeek R1, which is a Chinese AI, which is amazing, and it's going to summarize. I'm going to ask it for various things to summarize. I'm also going to ask it for metadata to give me titles, descriptions, and tags for first of all, the podcast that I'll put this on, and then the blog that I'll embed it in, and then maybe if I want to spread it on social media, I will ask it for tags for Instagram, and that's usually it, because I publish it on Instagram, the link, and it automatically publishes it to Facebook if I do that. I haven't, but I don't do that a whole lot. Okay, so what am I talking about here? Why is any of this important? I've been going on, but the point is that you can create your own little mini publishing empire and start getting paid and get practice and learn a lot of things at the same time. And so something that I really wanted to get to, which is actually really just content gold right here, actually, is really important. So again, dictation, transcription, summarization. You're speaking, getting that transcribed and summarized. AI does that. You can then feed that into other AI to have it organize it and turn your ideas into paragraphs and chapters, and then eventually, short books. Then here's what's really interesting, what I found out by doing this, and then listening to all these people, Gary Vaynerchuk reading his own audiobook, and learning about Earl Stanley Gardner dictating and then having his transcriptions directly turned into books, and then learning about Seth Godin's riffs, no chapters. So these unconventional things that first of all, Earl Stanley Gardner was just, hey, I'm just going to speak this and publish it as is. And then the fact that Seth Godin has just these essays, these 300 essays, no chapters, no major headings, just a bunch of essays in a book. And I thought that's a really great idea. And then Gary Vaynerchuk going off the subject and going off on a little tangent about something that, free association, that when he's reading his audio book. So, people doing creative or unusual things or what would seem unusual to people who mostly work in these different industries. Most people just stick to a specific format. And so, again, you shouldn't need validation, but it's also fun to see that other people are walking a different path. It's fun because I'm always doing that. And mainly I'm always doing it for what is most comfortable, convenient, and efficient, and what I can do the quickest. And that right now happens to be speaking and recording. And it has been for a long time. I started my first podcast on Spreaker, which I'm still with now, and unfortunately a lot of that stuff got deleted and erased when I let payments lapse, which is kind of sad for me because I had a lot of recordings with Floor, Elizabeth Carrasco, which have disappeared, and I wish that I would have downloaded those, or some of them might be somewhere else, but I do have some great recordings of her voice. It's, it's a bittersweet thing. So, but yeah, so since 2014, it's 2025 now, so that's 11 years I've been, and before that, I was a podcast guest where I would be on podcast for 2 hours sometimes, back since 2007. So a year after I started publishing on my website, hypnoathletics.com, and then in 2007, I started exercisingyourmind.com. I was a guest on Karma Cafe, which was on a platform called Blog Talk Radio, where basically you would call in on the phone, and then that would record the podcast, but it was called Blog Talk Radio. So it was a transition from, internet radio or satellite radio, like, people, I forget who's the really famous one that a lot of people talk about. I don't know why I'm forgetting his name right now, but it was kind of like that transition from the internet and satellite radio stuff into, I'm thinking of Howard Stern, but into podcasting. And so I was podcasting as a guest mainly since 2007. So it's been 18 years since I've been doing podcasts. And interestingly enough, Spreaker bought Blog Talk Radio. And so Spreaker, Blog Talk Radio, and iHeartRadio are if not affiliated with each other, they're the same company, or they're all under one umbrella somewhere. So just a little side note. But okay, the gold here, I really got to get to that and then finish this up. But what I found through this process where I have created these books and then I started reading them as my audiobooks. So I created these books and read them as my audiobook. One that I put together was my PhD thesis for the University of Metaphysical Sciences, which is a subject that has been dear to me for a long time, since a friend of mine, Kevin, introduced me to Brian Greene. He wrote a book called The Elegant Universe back in 1999, and then in 2004, I was introduced to the 2003 production of The Elegant Universe in a video series that was hosted by Brian Greene, and it's all about a niche in theoretical physics called string theory. And at the same time, that same year, What the Bleep Do We Know came out, which featured a bunch of physicists. And then when I finally graduated, I was in the Hypnosis Motivation Institute in 2004, and I graduated, and then the book and the adaptation, The Secret video, came out. And they had some physicists in there, and there was like a lot of connections, because The Elegant Universe, string theory, and then you had What the Bleep Do We Know, integrating quantum physics with consciousness, and then The Secret was all about consciousness. So it was interesting to see. I saw a niche in quantum mechanics with string theory, and then quantum mechanics and consciousness mixed. The whole thoughts become things business and that, and then The Secret, which was only about mostly the consciousness, but they did have a few people talking about quantum mechanics. So it was very interesting, the things that I was introduced to at the time, while I was also getting a degree in clinical hypnosis from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. I mean, just the coincidences and the great reinforcement that happened with all of that at the same time. But so, and so I finally put together my thesis on the intersection of cosmology and metaphysics, because they just go together so well. I mean, and when you read it, it's called Eternal Echoes: Metaphysical Inquiry into the Fate of the Universe. When you read it, you'll see, and I have many quotes in there from videos that I watched from Brian Greene and other physicists, and even movies and TV shows. One is from the movie Atlas, and he's talking about the interconnectedness of things. And then there's a line from the TV show The Big Bang Theory, which I only discovered in 2024, believe it or not, where one of the main characters that that most people know of, you can guess who I'm thinking of, but he says, if you subscribe to a linear interpretation of time, right? And so it's just fascinating. I mean, but so that, and I read that as what I call lo-fi audiobook podcast, and I read just section by section of that, and that was my first audiobook experiment that I did, and it was done in various different locations, and I call it lo-fi, sort of as by the way, I was thinking of Sheldon Cooper, is who I quoted in the thesis, because when he was talking to Penny about linear time. Anyway, there's so many quotes inside there from videos that I watched with Brian Greene, from movies, from TV shows, clips from different speakers like Sheldon Glashow and stuff like that, from The Elegant Universe, the video that was made, the video series for Nova that was made. And so that was my first, and I call it lo-fi, right? Because there's a type of music style, production style called lo-fi, where you hear, they intentionally leave in things or add things like the sound that you would get, like tape hiss, so white noise, or like the cracking and popping of a record player. And so, but mine's different because I don't think I've ever heard of lo-fi podcasting before, but I just like that aesthetic, or like the kintsugi, where the Japanese would break something and then put it back together with gold, and the whole idea of the imperfections is what makes it beautiful. And so I recorded the thesis in various different places, a couple different coffee shops. One of them was called Naughty Coffee Company in Suffolk. Another one was at a Starbucks in Red Mill on General Booth Boulevard in Virginia Beach. Another one, I think I finished it off mostly at Badass Coffee of Hawaii, which is also in Virginia Beach. And then just other places, but I think it was just mainly in those spots, and then just different places where I would stop and sit and just record. And so there's background noise, there's outside noise, there's cars, there's sirens. And so that's how I did the first one. And then I also recorded the Beyond the Blue Planet, A Passport to the Solar System, which I also authored, and had AI help me with the organization of the grammar, the punctuation, spelling, all that stuff. I had it organized. And then I did that with various other books. Man, what did I do? So I got Beyond the Blue Planet, Eternal Echoes. I know I did the one that I did, the Tarot of the Damned, The Curse That Haunts the Cards, which is a much shorter book that I did because there was a movie called Tarot that was coming out, and I had been working with a lot of tarot cards. Videos going back, man, way back since 2015. I made one for the song for my death metal band that I was in, called Demonic Indignation, and I used the Demon Tarot by Ariana Osborne in the video. And then I made another one called Mathematical Ontology with Floor, and I used the cards again. Both times she was with me when I made those videos. And so it just seemed appropriate. Tarot of the Damned, just playing with that little metaphysical, supernatural idea there. And there was a movie coming out, so I just wanted to make an unofficial companion book for that. And then From Theory to Practice, I'm still working on right now, which is engaging with the 8 limbs of yoga. I've been teaching yoga since 2004. And what's the other one I'm doing now is called The Mind's Labyrinth. The Mind's Labyrinth is navigating lost memories of alien encounters. So another subject that I've also been very much interested in. So, point being, now, gosh, I know I danced around the subject a lot, but bear with me here. I'm getting to this right now. Here's my point, because I've also heard a lot of criticism about, and rightfully so, about people claiming to be authors when they use AI to write their books, and they're just, wanting to see if they could make money from it. But I always really like the idea of what words really mean, and how people talk about spells and spelling words. But there's power in words. Words have a lot of power. But it's one thing to have AI write a book for you, and another to have AI write a book for you and not know anything about the subject just because you think it's. But there's actually a hack to that I discovered by accident, kind of reverse engineered, how you actually can become an authority in something that you do generate with AI completely that maybe you don't even know about. You can actually use it as a research tool to help you to become an authority. You can come up with an idea, and this happened with me starting to read my books as these lo-fi audiobook podcasts. So one, you come up with a prompt. Here are the steps. You come up with a prompt, you have something like Designer, or you put it together paragraph by paragraph through ChatGPT or something else, however you want to do it, and you generate the book. Then number 2 is you go through it, you read it all the way through, and then make notes of things that you want to change, to maybe change your own voice or take out some of the certain repetition or whatever, right? Then you go through it again and you make those changes. So now you're reading it a second time and you're making and editing the changes. This takes a long time, right? But you're becoming familiar with it, and you're editing it and you're researching it, and then you're also referencing it and coming up with better examples and wording it and putting it into your own voice. Then the next thing is, once you've done that, to then read it, to make the recording of it. And when you do that, now you're reading it at least a third time. And then fourth, you listen back to it and see if you want to make any changes. And by doing this, you're reading it 3 times and listening back to it. You're getting this exposure to this idea, and you can't help but to learn it if you're really paying attention, if you really care about it and you really want to get better. Like, this is a way, this repetition is a way to actually become familiar with the subject, maybe even if you weren't familiar with it before. And I found out, because I started to see different things that I was surprised about, how because, so the other thing was that I had been doing cold readings for a couple years now of neuroscience news, of tech briefs media, of Inside Precision Medicine, of military and aerospace technology, and reading those on the World Reading Club website and other websites for years, and then also reading my own blogs and podcasts for World Reading Club, because that's what it was, World Reading Club, not World Book Club, World Reading Club. It's just all about reading whatever. And I would notice that just in the act of me reading it, I was learning more and more about it, even just a cold reading. Of course, that's why you read things, right? You want to learn some information. But also paying attention to how I was reading it, so that I could hopefully get anyone who's listening to understand it. I was reading not just to read I was reading not just to get the word, just to make the sounds, but for comprehension. And then I would also discuss it and criticize it and and have a discussion about whatever I was reading from neurosciencenews.com or Tech Briefs Media or military and aerospace, or wherever it was, Inside Precision Medicine, wherever I was reading it from. But this process, just by proxy, just by doing it, just by taking massive action and just doing without asking for permission, I found that you can actually spend your time becoming an authority in various different subjects, even if you have it completely generated by AI. Now, my recommendation is that you generate text if you're going to use AI to help you put the whole thing together with a subject that you're already knowledgeable and passionate about, and maybe also an expert in already, or work in that field or whatnot. But also, if you just really want to get into something, you can completely have it generated by AI and then read through it to get familiar with it. There's stuff that you will learn that you didn't know before. There was a book I wrote called How to Write a Book with AI that I didn't write any of that. And just by looking at it, I just thought, wow, like, it really generated information that I didn't know before, and I was able to look it up and cross-reference. So it's almost like doing a comprehensive internet search and having it put it together for you, and then you can go through it and learn new information, and it can be very eye-opening. And you learn new things that way in an organized book form. It's like it puts together a full report for you. Some of it may be repetitive, but you learn something that you didn't know before. But then you go through that, then you can edit it, and then you read it and record it, and then you listen to the recording. And by just doing that, you become so familiar with information that maybe you weren't familiar with before. And it's such a powerful way that you can use these tools to just level up life and do something with your time other than just being completely passive. You can learn more. You can elevate your consciousness using these AI tools. I mean, I'm really using AI. When I heard you can have an AI assistant, I really took that to heart. I use AI as an assistant to help me with the other parts of the work. Like I'm going to do with this. I'm going to have the Galaxy AI transcribe it, as terrible as that might be sometimes. Then I'm going to take the summary, and I'm going to give that to DeepSeek, and I'm going to have DeepSeek maybe give me a comprehensive summary to put before. Maybe, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out. And then I'm going to ask DeepSeek to give me an optimized title, a description, and then tags to put in the podcast and the blog that I'm going to embed the podcast in. And then maybe even ask it to give me a prompt that I can then feed to Google Gemini to generate an image that I'll use as a cover for the podcast and the blog. And that workflow, that AI stack has been doing really well for me, just using only those three. I was using other ones before. I kind of got into Grok a little bit. I even used Facebook's Meta AI a little bit. I even made some audio dramas and recordings with that. I used a couple of other ones, but I've settled on using Galaxy AI, Gemini, and DeepSeek, which really Galaxy AI and Gemini are really merging. Google and the Android are merging. So we'll see what happens with it. But it's a good stack because they all kind of compensate for things that other ones don't have. Like I can't talk and have conversations with Galaxy AI right now or DeepSeek, but I can do that with Gemini. And Gemini makes a whole hell lot of mistakes. They all have their pros and cons. But anyway, to summarize this up, I'm going to go back over what's the whole thing to take away from this here. Is the dictation, transcription, and summarization. You can turn your own, you can literally speak a book or an essay or a paper into existence, just speaking it into existence, because that's what dictation, transcription, and summarization can help you to do. You just speak your idea, your own original idea, your own human-generated voice, things that come from experience. Like, for example, everything I've been talking about right now is derivative, right, from things that I've known before. These authors that I talked about before. I talked about Dan Kennedy and L. Ron Hubbard and Seth Godin and Gary Vaynerchuk and Earl Stanley Gardner, right? And these things that I learned from reading their books and listening to them speak, right? And then realized, oh, this dictation, transcription, summarization is nothing new. But now with AI as my assistant, I'm able to have it transcribe and summarize for me and then create all this metadata in order to get my ideas out. And it's just been amplifying my voice. I'm literally speaking into existence a multimedia enterprise, a one-person enterprise, like the website that I have, one-person enterprise. And just by taking massive action and not asking permission and not caring about what people are saying or any of that stuff like that. Like, well, let me correct that. I care what people say. It's just that validation and acceptance of my ideas has no bearing on my execution. I'm going to do what I'm doing anyway. But it's actually gotten to the point where I care, but it doesn't bother me what people say anymore. Like, I would rather people like and accept my ideas and it gets spread far and wide and help me to promote things and people think I'm cool or whatever. I don't know, right? But it doesn't, in the long run, actually, it doesn't stop me from executing. I'm just doing it anyway, and you can see the evidence that I don't stop because of the fact that I've had websites online since 2006, and I just, and it's mainly the internet's been my notebook. Okay, but let me wrap this up by saying again what this whole thing is about: dictation, transcription, summarization. You can create essays, papers, books that you literally speak into existence. AI is your assistant to transcribe and summarize this. You can use it to help you organize, of course, your spelling, your punctuation, your grammar. You can have it expand your work and reorganize it and help you to organize and edit everything. And then you can learn more information by then reading and recording what you've created and then listening back to it. And you basically, like what I've been doing, I've just basically created my own educational institution. And I'm compounding and learning exponentially so much more so quickly just by doing this. I've created my own media production unit based off of my own words, my voice, my idea, my experience, and things that I'm deriving. And then it leads into new things and new opportunities, and I'm learning more and more and more every time. I mean, I have like 5 or 6 audiobook podcasts, these lo-fi audiobook podcasts that I put out on worldreadingclub.com, simply just because I just kept on experimenting and pushing, and now I found a really great way to organize it, and now I know what to do. Now I'm about to just launch out and have just dozens and dozens of audiobook podcasts. I'm in audiobook. I'm in my flow now with this. I've realized this is one of the big things that I've always wanted to do, is just produce material, and now I can produce my own audiobooks. I don't have to read anybody else's material anymore. I can generate and create my own material with AI as my assistant and hone it and make it even better and better and better. And now just really use my own voice and take away a lot of that AI edge and that really what some people call AI slop. It's really recognizable. But you can get rid of that and put more and more of your own voice into it, especially now when I start using better transcription software. All I'm going to have it do is just make sure that it cleans up the grammar and punctuation and leave my own words in there without it changing and rearranging it so that it looks like these AI blocks that I've been working with before. But it's fine, because it's all my own stuff, all my own ideas, all things that I'm very interested in, that I have a track record for years in my blogs and things like that I can cross-reference, and you can look up that for years. For example, space science, astrophysics, cosmology, quantum mechanics has been an interest of mine. Philosophy, metaphysics, alien abduction, tarot. I've been using divination tools for years. I'm a numerologist. I've been using runes and tarot cards for years, mainly the Demon Tarot because it's been the simplest one for me. The runes from Ralph H. Bloom, and I started off with Numerology for Beginners by Jerry Bauer back in 2005. So it's all the things that I've written and put out there, it's just all from stuff that I'm doing, and music, martial arts, and those things that I mentioned. So that's really what you're getting from it. I'm really just finding a way to speak into existence essays, papers, and books based on my own conversations with myself, these stream of consciousness like this. And now with tools like Google Gemini, I'm able to have conversations with it at times, even argue with it and call it out on some of its BS and create completely original content like that. And so that's it. Use your voice. I suppose maybe next time when I talk about this, and I probably have made it more succinct before, but you can use your voice to create written material and create your own organized media output, multimedia output, because by just using your voice, you can put this audio, and I could take this audio and put it into the backdrop of any video, and also create text. I can take this right now, have this transcription and other stuff like that, and just put them into PDFs that I can embed in the blog, and you can download a PDF if you want it. It's just amazing. I'm really excited about this. And again, I'm going to do it no matter if anybody likes it or not. It's just, I have this obsession, And I know that there are going to be other people who want to do stuff like this too. So that's why I'm sharing it. And also, this is just a long ass piece of content that I've created. And yeah, it's probably going to go on HakeemAlexander.com. I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, I am Dr. Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander, PhD. Got my first doctorate from the University of Metaphysical Sciences. And I'm going to work on another one, but this thesis is going to be completely different than the other one, because this is coming straight from it's going to be a completely different style of writing, because I don't think I'm going to have AI edit it the way that I did Eternal Echoes. I really want it to be in the voice and style more like in between Eternal Echoes and the series of blogs that I did, which I also made that into a lo-fi audiobook podcast, which is called Olympus Has Fallen Down the Rabbit Hole. That's also available on World Reading Club. And you can see the style of writing there, which was from way back, and then how Eternal Echoes is written. And so you'll see what I'm talking about. But all that World Reading Club is a place where a lot of this stuff is going to be my main hub for everything. I even just put up a video on there of me doing some capoeira stuff. So that's it. This is really about dictation, transcription, and summarization, and how you can use that to create essays, blogs, papers, books, and audiobook podcasts. That's what I'm pioneering here for myself, is the audiobook I'm in my audiobook podcast phase right now, so I'm going to crank out probably a couple dozen of these things before I slow down and then start transitioning from where I've been in the nonfiction sphere to really getting myself into the sci-fi fantasy sphere, which I really kind of want to do, which I've been dabbling with a little bit. So that's it. I'm Dr. Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander, PhD, and I have discussed something, I'm just going to call it again now, transcription, dictation, transcription, summarization. I don't know. DeepSeek, help me. What are we going to call this? How long has this been going? Did I just come in under an hour? Did I really speak? There we go, 57 minutes. All right, fantastic.